Okay, welcome to Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, the J.R. Stewart.
And I'm your co host, Tommy Duncan, TD3. Jimmy, it is Wednesday, August the 31st, the last day of the month, 2022. Jimmy, if it's Wednesday evening,
It is Black Men Speak.
all
So,
right.
Tom, we have a very special guest, but before we get to that guest, let's give a big shout out to Liquid for providing our theme music and also to Forest Films in our own studio for doing the producing and providing our virtual studio. And Tom, this man doesn't need an introduction, but we're going to introduce him anyway. And so, won't you introduce our guest and tell us what the topic is for tonight?
Absolutely. I am ready. Jimmy, we have our returning guest, Mr. Charles O'Neill, the man, the myth, the legend, who has a very august background in mass media, but also is in the world of business and politics, as he is now, I believe, the chair of the National Black Chambers, or the U.S. Chair of the U.S. Chambers of Commerce, but it also is tied into the Texas State Chamber of Commerce and, of course, the Dallas Black Chamber of Commerce. Charles, it is always good to have you here. Welcome back, brother.
It is always a pleasure to be with you and Jimmy too, Tommy. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you tonight.
But
Amen.
Charles, with all of those accomplishments, I'm pretty sure that the thing that you're most proud of in life is that you still have the top views of any of our guests on Black Men Speak.
Bam! That's it. Absolutely.
Yeah, you still have the top spot.
Well, that is good to hear, and I hope that it remains so, and I hope
Yeah,
to add to that record. Okay.
yes. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you all this evening, those who are listening in cyberspace. We are here to talk about an issue that most people, unless you are literally in a coma, have probably heard about over the last couple of weeks, but probably have been hearing about this over the last couple of years, and that is the student loan forgiveness program that has been announced. I believe it's been maybe a week or so by now by President Biden. And what we'd like to talk about this evening is this was a campaign promise that was made a couple of years ago. What impact does this have on America? More specifically, what impact does this have on Black America? If we look at the stats, if we look at what's going on, Jimmy, we talk a lot about creating economies within our community and creating wealth. And this is one of those things that is front and center.
Okay, well, Tom, I'm on record that I don't agree with the program.
Mhm.
Um, this is actually going to set black people back collectively. A few
Okay.
blacks will benefit from the debt forgiveness, but the bulk of black America who has not gone to college, who doesn't have a student loan, just out there working everyday people, are going to have to subsidize and pay for this monstrosity. Um, when you start talking about $10,000 gift handout to folks that make up to $125,000 a year, or a family that makes up to $250,000 a year, Tom, these are not people who can't afford to pay back their student loans. Your student loan is supposed to be an investment. Hopefully, you invest in an education, and that education affords you an opportunity to repay, to honor your word, your commitment, and pay it back so others can benefit from the same money. When you when you have a president that's trying to buy votes, let's be honest. This is what this is. You apply in October, just right before the November elections. Um, but when you have an organization, a president, a leadership that's trying to buy votes and put it on the backs of working people, most black folks are not going to benefit from this debt forgiveness. Most black people are going to have to pay. Working people, everyday average folks, are going to have to work and pay to subsidize a handout to some very wealthy people. And then let me say this, Tom, this is how dishonest a lot of these folks are. A lot of folks are now canceling their payments, not paying their student debts off now in order to qualify for this money. Some folks have even went as far to ask for a refund after paying for their debt. Now, I borrowed money to go to school, and I repaid every red cent of my student loan money, every dollar of it. I owe nothing for student loan. And for all those people out there who repaid their student loan and did the right way, you should be commended. Having people whine and cry about the choices they made and the stipulations and the consequence that comes after that, and then for the government to step in. Well, if you're going to do debt forgiveness, I have a small business with construction loans. Forgive that debt. For folks out there with a mortgage and car payments, forgive those debts. So when you start picking and choosing winners and losers, when you put your hand on the scale, that's not very American. It's not very right. It's very immoral. And to make people, working people, average everyday people, subsidize a gift and a handout to a bunch of six-figure wealthy college graduates who can easily afford to pay their student loan back is just not right.
Well, that is one way to look at it, Jimmy. Are we going to ask all these folks who got their PPP loans forgiven to pay that money back?
I don't see why not.
Okay, now I don't think anybody's complaining or asking about that. When we think about all of the financial institutions that were bailed out after the Great Recession, after they put us in a hole in the first place, and the government bailed them out, are we going to ask them to pay that money back?
Well, the automakers, when they got bailout money for GM, GM and Chrysler, Ford didn't accept any money, but those companies did pay that money back. So
and the reality of it is, Jimmy, we bail out a lot of billion-dollar corporations.
And you know what, Tom? And when you put that on the back of everyday working people, it's still not right.
And we have rebuilt a lot of countries, but nobody seems to complain about
So multiple wrongs don't make a right. When you put that on the back of everyday people.
We start with the $1 billion, and then we can get to these thousandaires.
I'm with you. No problem. Let's ask all of them. Exactly. Let's ask all of them to pay it back.
Exactly. But I think let's start with the billionaires first. Because the NFL got a PPP loan. We have like wealthy, large companies who got loans over the last couple of years during COVID, not to mention these recessions that we bailed billion.
Why are you calling it a loan if nobody's paying it back?
We start out with the wealthy first, and then we get to these thousandaires. But anyway, why don't we do this? Because we don't want to take the entirety of the show. That's why we got Charles here to kind of give his thoughts on his perspectives on this as well, and we will get through it. So at any rate, let's go ahead. Jimmy, you definitely made some very salient points there, yes. But I think we've got to start with the big boys and then get to the small fries. And that's my 2 cents on that. Charles, what are your thoughts on this? And what do you see?
Well, I have heard opinions that range from those you expressed all the way to those that Jimmy expressed. And clearly, like most things, what's really happening is probably someplace in the middle, right? We do know that bailing out or giving tax breaks to billionaires is crazy. We know that. We know that those cuts will cost the economy across a period of time. We don't know yet what the financial impact of these student loans being forgiven beyond the usurious interest rates that will not be captured by those folk who extended the loans. One of the pitfalls, one of the really, really tragic parts of student loans, and I never got a student loan. However, the tragedy, the horror stories of people who, say for instance, borrowed $30,000 and made payments for 25 years and now owe $70,000. That's a problem, and in some way or other, and because the government sanctioned those entities that financed these loans at these usurious rates, repackaged them, resold them, and that's why there's compounding interest across multiple levels of insurers of these loans. Because for what Jimmy said, the great part about what Jimmy says is that there was 45 million people who got student loans. Well, if I package up $45 million worth of 45 million student loans and put it in the marketplace, that's a great portfolio. Yeah. Particularly if there are no cap on what I can charge interest rate on those loans. And so what we saw was this cluster I almost said something bad, but really bad business, and on the rates of interest charged on those loans. So any relief, I think, any relief for folk who have maybe for 20 years paid a loan, still owe more than the principal that they originally borrowed, I think it makes sense, because you didn't penalize those insurers and those loan providers who charged usury or usurious rates. You didn't go after them. They knew what they were doing. They knew what the impact of those practices over a period of time would result in. Where we find now that, again, people are burdened by an effort to improve their economic situation. That's really backwards, I think. And what we know for the program, Tommy, I did a little non-scientific Googling and found that the way it was offered, clearly, as we talked about earlier, it was not in executive order. It was not challenged for Jimmy's, again, back to Jimmy's, it was not challenged for political reasons, because those Republicans knew that coming up on election year, it would not look good to be overtly opposed to it. They can do the background chatter and say, oh, no, it's a handout, but they didn't oppose it, because the way the Biden administration couched it was the extension of an existing education department program. And so there's always been some level of forgiveness allowed for veterans, for other hardships. And so this program that had this sliding scale of how much you make versus how much you owe, $10,000 to $20,000, very clearly, if I am a debtor, if I get relief, I don't care where it's coming from, I feel better about it. And I think that's what the sentiment is of most of the Black folk that I have talked to. Big thumbs up, wish it was 50, wish it was 100, wish it was a clean slate wipe out. I can't speak to Jimmy's contention that it's a long-term drag on the nation's economy, because we have not seen a correlative drag on the economy from other breaks that have been extended, like you referenced, Tom. So I understand the political positioning of folk who don't appreciate quote unquote government handouts, but there are so many government handouts out there that farmers been getting handouts for 70 years, for not growing crops. Like we talked about the auto industry, we talked about the healthcare industry, all of them get some subsidy. We just, right here in Texas, telecoms are getting a bailout because they get to add some arcane figure to the back end of every one of your phone bills. So governments, by their nature, are designed to distribute the resources, that is the tax revenue of governments. And so it's no secret that whatever are the benefits, and I'll call them benefits to Black borrowers particularly, is a 1 in a million kind of deal, because stereotypically there's not much legislation that has been a benefit. Particularly financial kind of legislation has not benefited Black folk by and large. And so, because we're here to talk conversations about there's Asian specific legislation or Hispanic specific, without any regard to the fact that the only legislation that was designed expressly for Black folk was to keep us from doing something.
Okay, so let me speak to that, Charles, real quick, and let me say this: I'm more of a champion of truth than I am a Republican. I am a proud conservative Republican, but I'm a champion of truth in the vein of my ancestors who fought against bad systems, socially, politically. It didn't matter. my ancestors, our ancestors, forced this nation by standing up through their resistance and protest, forced the nation to come to grips with that she was not living up to her words that all men are created equal. And back then we didn't need handouts to keep our families together. We didn't need handouts to grow our communities. We didn't need handouts to do Black Wall Street or other areas to have some great schools like Dunbar. We were
Mhm.
self-sufficient and relied on ourselves. That sense of self and self-reliance has been stripped away from us. It wasn't taken away from us. We exchanged our pride and our dignity for a few coins. Now, let me just say this real quickly. When I went to school, not to date myself, but this is a while back, the rate was $9 a credit hour when I started University of New Orleans. And I remember during my junior year, they had the audacity to raise the rate to $11 a credit hour, and you saw the outcry over that $2 increase. What do you think is going to happen when you put more? The universities have outpaced inflation since I graduated. They are the number one contributors to inflation. You give someone a $10,000 bonus, and what do you think the schools are going to do? Raise tuition $10,000. Why? Because they now know you have more money in your hand. Obama talked about giving people $4,000, and if he did, guess what would have happened? Tuition would have gone up $4,000 simply because the students have the money. And as long as you keep increasing the money supply, these schools are going to do what they continue to do, raise their prices. Now, when I went to school, I worked at UPS and was able to pay my tuition. And when my daughter was ready to go to school, it was about 15 some years ago, and we checked into the tuition rates at University of Texas in Arlington, not Austin. The she came back and told me, your dad, this is $300 an hour. I said, you can't be telling me the truth.
Oh
We
yes.
can't go from $11 when I went to school to one generation that we're up to 300 some dollars an hour.
Yes,
I
sir,
said,
Jimmy.
this is
It's the same concept of what we call compound interest in the money markets. Because on average, and I know this has probably been at least 15 years ago, when I was doing some research, and I believe that the year-over-year growth of the cost of tuition at that time was 6% year-over-year growth. You compound that over what, 15, 20 some odd years, yeah, you get to $300
in
per
my case
hour.
40 years.
Exactly.
So my point is, Tom, is that who are we really benefiting? For young kids that are coming up out of high school, their parents trying to send them to school to get to better their life, and then they're stuck with $300 and $400, not a class. We're talking about a credit hour
Correct.
to have
Correct.
rates that they're trying to pay. What? So we can subsidize and give a few really wealthy people who can afford to pay their way a benefit to buy votes. So when we put this in the context of how does it hurt Black people? Well, I would love to say that we were at the top of the food chain where we can just absorb these costs and it doesn't impact us. We're not, Tom. In
Well,
fact, in the country that we help make great, the country that we help, transform into a nation that people are flocking to, killing themselves to try to get into. These same people were not trying to break their neck to get into America when the Klan was running around lynching people at free will. When the black codes and the pig laws and Jim Crow laws were prevalent. So, America for what it is now, the nation that people are trying to get to, we had a big hand in making that happen. And now, Tom, at a time when we should be reaping the benefit of that sacrifice that ancestors made, it's being taken away from our young kids. If we were rich and we were one of the wealthiest group in America, I would say, okay, no problem. We can just pick up the cost and keep moving forward. But we're not that group, Tom. So these policies that sound good on the surface, we're just going to give some people some debt relief, are really going to impact and hurt young kids that are coming out of school trying to better themselves to get to the
and
same place where those
how does
people are
it
making
hurt?
six figures now,
Okay, how does it hurt kids coming out of school now?
because the tuition is going to continue to go up, Tom.
Well,
You
yes,
ain't,
yeah, but it's been going up, Jimmy, over
well,
the
Tom,
last
okay, but it keeps going up because we keep putting money into that supply that the schools can tap into. you know what? You take that money away and you'll see what happens. If there are not trillions of dollars poured into student loan, Pell Grants, if you truly had to go back to the days when people saved and paid for their tuition for their kids, maybe you don't get into a top tier Division I named university like University of Texas or University Arkansas, Alabama. Maybe you go to junior college first. Maybe you try to get a scholarship. Maybe you look for all the other alternatives to pay for your kids' tuition. But now, we make the money supply easy. Just sign this paper at 18. What the hell does an 18-year-old know about borrowing money? They
No,
haven't signed a contract in all their life, never
I
been
know.
allowed to sign a
Right.
contract
Yeah.
till you reach the age of majority. And now they're signing loans for thousands or tens of thousands of dollars that they're going to be responsible for. They think it's free money. They think it's all good until you get out of school. Hopefully you have something that will help you pay for that. But if you don't, and you're stuck waiting tables, working for minimum wage and tips, and that student loan payment is coming due, yeah, all of a sudden now is a bad thing.
Well, you bring up some interesting points, and I guess if he was forgiving all loans, you probably have a very, very good point. But we're talking about monetary policy and structural issues, as it pertains to what's going on in this economy, and then what's happening with higher education right now. And this is an event at one point in time when we start talking about the cost of education, and when our parents were growing up, and then we were growing up to some degree. Education was what we were told was the great equalizer. It
And
allowed
it
you to
is
lift
to some
yourself
degree.
up
Yes, it is.
out of poverty so you can get a decent middle class education, afford a home, being able to get a stable, career, and you basically wouldn't be in debt your entire life. And so this is a one-time event, but I think you bring up a point, who does this really benefit? It does benefit the wealthy, because we have gotten to a point where pretty soon, Jimmy, the only folks who will be able to afford an education have to be the wealthy. But let me back up on this, because I can see that Charles has been kind of spinning. His mind has
Well,
been spinning on this. Let me get
I
into the conversation.
I'm clearly listening, and I don't want to move too quickly, because it's a great conversation about this, like you said, and I will say not an isolated, but a flashpoint kind of occurrence from federal government. But I think it allows us, or gives us an on ramp to kind of talk about uh, the entire law and policy making process, and how it has disparate impact on in our case, on Black folk. And so we know that uh, uh, just like Brown v. Board of Education engendered a generation of white flight and disinvestment from urban public schools, because they did not want to educate Black children and brown children in
They
Texas.
still don't.
And they still don't. And so we know then that we can probably make a correlation in this ever spiraling increase in tuition for the same purposes. I think the University of Texas has been at 2% Black for the last 35, 40 years.
Texas A&M as well.
No matter how big the population grows, it's almost capped. And so those folk who did make it through and able to pay tuition absolutely have been penalized by this cap on folk that they can relate to on their college campus. And so but that it's not just education, but it's in healthcare, and it's in literally every part of government. We clearly see it in local politics, where decisions are made closest to us that have negative impacts on virtually every part of our daily lives. Jimmy's a businessman. Tommy, you work in the world of finance and in business as well. We know that there are policies in place that are effective governors on our entry into the marketplace. Jimmy, now you're in construction. You know that the permitting process is onerous in
I
some
know it
cases.
is. You're
You
right.
know,
I'm dealing with it
and
now.
and it's doubly so for you because you don't know who's standing on the other side of the counter.
Yes.
You
So
know,
sometimes,
and
sometimes you have to leave that envelope with the bills in it
yeah,
to get things done. So
you know. So, but it might be somebody that just says, "I don't like Jimmy Stewart, man,"
yeah, that's
and
true.
I don't like how he looks, and I don't want him to be able to do what he's clearly competent, capable, ready, willing, and able to do. And I want to do my part to make sure he's not able to do it. Those kind of challenges that we continue to face are extra judicial, so to speak. They're extra outside of what the legislative intent is of all these policies and that were put in place ostensibly to support our full entry into citizenship.
Okay.
Well, if I look at this at a microeconomic level, and we've talked about this several times in our community in particular, we're talking about the economics of the Black community. Average net worth in white community is about 100 and I don't know 90,000, give or take. Obviously, that's probably gone up some over the last couple of years because of the housing boom that's finally starting to cool off. Average net worth in the Black community is in the mid 20s. I want to say maybe $25,000. Latin American community about 30, in the low 30s, some $1,000, just above African Americans. And we look at the ability to be able to create net worth and to close the wealth gap in America. And if you listen to most of the pundits or those who are in the business of coaching and grooming people to build wealth in America, the first thing they typically tell you to do is pay off your debt, start saving your money, investing. If you have to, get a second gig, things of that nature, and understand that there are some political issues with this whole piece that we're looking at with student loan forgiveness. If we narrow it down within the Black community, because Black folks are more likely to have debt than any other group, and that's primarily because they don't have the wealth, and so they end up having to get a loan for something like an
Well,
education.
and plus, Tom, we are programmed into taking on a lot of that debt. A lot of that is predator debt.
Well,
When we're taking out loans at 29.9% interest, and
mhm,
other folks are borrowing money at a 0.25% interest. Now,
mhm,
let's get this straight. In the construction business, the Wall Street guys now own 15% of homes in America. Investment guys, they're not homeowners. We're not talking about just white people. We're talking about the really big investment guys own 15% of homes in America. And what are they doing? They just rent them out and driving the costs up. Why?
right.
Because a rent on a house pays a better percentage than me
Yes.
trying to get you 10% out in the marketplace. So it's a better use of capital. And here's what I say to piggyback on Charles's point. I'm not opposed to a government handout to help a group out that's been desperately treated in America. I'm not opposed to it if it's structured the right way. I like what was done during Reconstruction, what was attempted to be done to get people into the marketplace, get them into government, to advance Black people out of slavery and into schools and been functional part of American society. Unfortunately, Reconstruction ended far too soon at the hands of some crooked dealing. But if we were talking about that type of an investment, we're talking about $500 billion that's going to cost this year on loan forgiveness. Take a portion of that. That's going to be whatever loan forgiveness was going to be targeted towards Black people, and put that money into giving it to me to invest in the Black community and rebuild it. We'd all be free to borrow. I promise
Well,
you.
Jimmy, you're right, Jimmy, but they are not going to do that, and
What I'm saying, Tom, these are the things we should fight for. We're gonna have a voice, and we're gonna. Can we not demand better schools for our kids? Can we not demand, for those who say that America's never done enough to help rebuild the Black community, but we keep
because they've
aligning ourselves.
they've certainly helped rebuild practically every other
Well,
country
Tom,
that looks like
the white
America.
liberal in America does not have an incentive to rebuild America, the Black America. They spend far too long destroying Black
Are you
America.
saying that conservatives have expressed an
I'm
interest
saying that
historically in
conservatives
doing that?
brought you They brought you Reconstruction. The father of the,
But
of
then
the
what
hold,
kind of
hold,
building?
hold on, Tom.
Jimmy,
Hold on.
what
Let
kind
me
of
bring it.
building they made
Tom,
after Reconstruction?
let me bring it through history.
Okay.
So they brought you Reconstruction. What did Woodrow Wilson, the first post Civil War president, bring you?
Wait a minute,
Separate
Jimmy.
but equal.
But we got to back up.
He brought you the Klan, Tom.
I understand,
So
Jimmy. But
okay, so let's go forward. Let's go forward.
Wait a
So
minute,
when
Jimmy.
when black people
happened?
tried,
What
hold on,
happened?
Tom.
Wait,
Okay,
Jimmy.
I'm getting to that. If you just let me speak.
But
So
Jimmy, you
when
skipped too far. You
okay,
skipped over what happened.
if you know
after
what, in this
Reconstruction.
time that you've interrupted me, I could have been to the present day. So when we tried to build schools that competed with the white private schools on the East Coast, and I'm talking about the first black high schools that were created that were outperforming white private schools on the East Coast, because that's what they set a goal to do that. It was a white liberal that came in and destroyed your inner city schools. When black kids grew up in strong households with a mother and a father, it was your white liberal Democrat who came in and destroyed that. So these people have no interest whatsoever. Joe Biden, Jim Crow Joe Biden, has no interest whatsoever to benefit black folks. Now you say, well, what have Republicans done for you? Well, what are they supposed to do for you? You don't vote for them. They owe you absolutely nothing other than respect. But you know what? The best unemployment for blacks came under Trump. The bailout for the black schools came under Trump. You know, the $80 billion in economic investment until you started rioting and looting and burning things down came under Trump. And what person recently who made an effort to try to win the black vote and do something and have a good decency to at least say, if I'm not going to vote for you, I won't vote against you. But no, we voted against them. Now Republicans have no incentive whatsoever. The next Republican that comes, they're going to look and say, well, you know, Trump did all these things, used his political capital in the first 4 years to get some things done for black people, to include the number one thing we've been crying about for over a generation, which is sentencing reform. And once again, you showed your true colors, because out of someone telling you that Republicans are racist, you don't even support the one person who supported you. So no, Republicans are not going to do anything for you because there's nothing in it for them. But on top of that, Tom, we need to be making noise about improving our schools to give our kids a good education and economic development that we all know needs to happen. And there needs to be a huge, massive infusion of money into the black community for that to happen. And putting money in debt reduction for people who make up to $125,000 a year is not the answer.
Tommy, I know you're championing at the bit too, but I think that we've got enough historical evidence that black folk have managed to suffer regardless of which political party was in power.
I would agree.
We can argue by degrees or by shades and
degrees matter, Charles, and shade matter. But
where we are
you do make a point, though. I mean, I'm not saying
where we are right
Republicans
now is the
don't have some dirt on their
history.
hands. They just don't have as much mud as those white liberals do.
You know.
All right.
Again, I can't speak to those kind of labels that they ascribe to themselves, partisan politics and or political bent, either conservative or liberal, whatever that means. I do know that irrespective of party, irrespective of ideology, this is where we find ourselves as black folk. And that has to be attributed to somebody that's in power, able to affect those kind of policies.
But Charles, don't you agree that we have to do this?
No question. But I think part of the slog that we have to work our safety, I think we got the biggest congressional black caucus in history, almost 50, right? But that's 50 in a body of 435.
Right, Charles.
2 out of a body of 100, 3 of a body of 100 in the Senate. We don't win those battles by votes, you know, and so we have to figure out other ways to make impacts on policy decisions, and those can only come, again, I'll say gratuitously, through conversations like this, but amplified and multiplied. You know, we got to.
Charles, I disagree with you to some degree. That when much of the Biden platform was being legislated, the Congressional Black Caucus held the power to stop that. And so if you're not going to fight to improve the black situation, don't allow the white liberal devil to destroy. So when Biden cuts $100 billion from black schools, I heard many of these Congressional Black Caucus members stand up and say, I'm not going to vote for your infrastructure package if you continue to do that. But you know
Well,
what?
they might have been tired from fighting the white conservative devil. We don't
Okay,
know.
the white conservative devil, Charles, put the $100 billion into for black schools. So that way it's
That's not
budgeted.
entirely accurate. I know that's one
Okay.
talking point, but that's not entirely accurate. But that's against the talking point.
Okay, so put the money in, budget it so the next 10 years, so you wouldn't have to come crawling to Congress every year on your knees asking for money. You don't even know how to budget for the next 2 years because you don't know what you're going to receive. So by putting it into the budget for the next 10 years, now I know budgets are only good for 2 years. So future Congress don't have to honor a budget from a previous Congress. But at least it was a start in the right direction. So for Biden to come along and take $100 billion away from black schools, the schools that need the most, and for the Congressional Black Caucus to talk all this crap, but in the end, they voted for the infrastructure and the money got taken away. So this is what I'm talking about. The degrees
It didn't get taken away because it wasn't funny money in the first place.
Okay.
It was in a, it wasn't funny money. It wasn't even existing.
But
again,
Charles, that is Washington talk.
They have us discussing policy decisions that we had no part in formulating. And
we didn't formulate it.
Jimmy, let him finish right quick.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I just think that what we have, the biggest failure I see is that we in 2022 don't understand the sausage factory. We don't understand how policies are created. Clearly those folk who find themselves in that machinery should, but we don't have a generation of understanding of how they're making sausage in Washington, D.C. or in Austin for that matter, since we're here in Texas. I just know that when the Texas legislature convenes every other odd number of years,
yes, every other year,
and they know that they're going to have $500 billion of tax revenue to cut up, that those halls are jam-packed with folk that don't look like us.
Right, lobbying.
And the folk that we have, 17 in the House and 2 in the Senate, with a responsibility for ensuring that 5 million black folk, more black folk in Texas than any other state, get some benefit from this flood of tax revenue.
We get very little.
We're not getting it, man. And
that percentage goes down every year because you tell me about it. We talk about it. It's sad.
Every year.
So, this is my point, Charles, that we need to be fighting for the right thing. We need to stop following other people, complaining about what they want, and then getting on their bandwagon. Their bandwagons don't go to the same destination that we need our wagons to go to. We need our schools fixed. We need a massive investment in the black community, but not just giving out money. No, we need real, true economic investment to make things happen. Banks, insurance, financial.
I really believe conversations like this get us closer to it. But here is, again, crazy me, this is where I start from. I do believe in some universal truths. And among them is, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
That's true.
Every time that you make public, every time you make apparent what your end goal is, there is a countervailing force trying to make sure that you don't get that. And until we get the political and economic wherewithal to make moves without telegraphing them, we'll get cut off at the pass every time. And I think that's part of this political dance that we're going to have to mature into. And so while we can say, everybody says universally that, oh yeah, we're for better improvements in education. Well, they say, well, what do you want? You want a football stadium, right? Well, shit, we didn't have no stadium, so yeah, we want a football stadium, but they didn't address your curriculum, right? But you got a pretty new school building, but you got bad teachers, or not enough teachers, or 45 students crammed in the classroom. And so we have to understand that You making this move, I'm making this move. And that's the way politics go. Richard Pryor would say, well, that's the politics, baby. That's the part of the dance that we have not, in my estimation, mastered. And that's the kind of thing that goes on again in that Capitol building down there in Austin. Every day they say, what do y'all want? Y'all want some free bus rides to go see Uncle Bobo down in Huntsville? That ain't a policy priority for me.
Right.
You want a drug clinic in your neighborhood? No, I don't want us to be on drugs. I'm saying let's fix that. And so while we understand that there are pressing issues in our communities that can only be fixed when we are able to utilize our money, and that's the one thing that I do have an expectation of government being able to address, when it's very clear that government writ large uses my money to fix a whole bunch of other folks' problems. And I'm saying I need to have the comfort of saying that I can go to an elected representative and say, these are the things I need, with full expectation that I get those things. Again, because everybody else is getting what they want and they're using my money to do it.
Well, Charles, when you incentivize growth and success, which our government does do that, they get it. When you incentivize poverty, you get more of it. And which one are we getting? So when you talk about policies, obviously, since we're getting more growth in the poverty area than we are in the economic development area, it seems like those policies are directed at incentivizing more poverty for us, because we don't see the economic growth.
Yeah. They're punitive policies.
So we can't keep supporting and backing and having one party rule over black people and somehow expect things are going to change, because so far the policies that have come out of that group have not incentivized any growth for us.
Again, I'm not going to argue about one or the other, because I live in Texas and the Republican Party runs Texas and black folk are suffering. A Republican Party is running Mississippi. The capital of Mississippi does not have running water. Why? Because of white flight.
Yeah, Charles. But the suffering is Democrat strongholds, though. We're not suffering out here in Collin County. But I understand. So, but the point of this whole discussion is about the impact of the loan forgiveness in the black community. And all I'm saying is that the impact is not good for us. Yeah, the impact is not good for us. I can go on and talk about the politics back and forth. I'm just saying.
I think it's a net benefit, particularly to those folk who have some of their loans, some of their debt forgiven.
That's just a
I
point.
think it's a bit.
Wait a sec. Let him finish, Jimmy. What were you saying?
No, I just said, I say for me personally, if I owe $50,000 and I woke up tomorrow and I owe 40, cool. Cool. That I don't think that's a deal breaker at all. If I owe 50 and woke up tomorrow and I owe 30, cool. That's cool, man. I'm good. And I think that sentiment prevails more than a studied conversation about long-term impacts of that. We don't know what the long-term impacts are going to be. We know it may actually bubble up into a booming economy, which will mitigate any loss or any sense of loss that might be a function of this forgiveness of debt. We don't know.
Gotcha. And it looks like there we go. I think
Jimmy's coming back. Okay, there he is.
Yeah,
he's back in now.
Biden administration using the CIA and FBI to cut my internet off. Message gets too real. They go after their enemies. So I need to watch what I say, I guess. If I want to
Jimmy, I think that internet service on there. And we are about we're about a quarter until the top of hour, so we still have a few minutes. Ultimately, if you look at it at a micro level, I think I was looking at an article a little bit earlier that said about 2/3 of seniors in 2017, 65% to be exact, had some type of student loan debt, so to speak. And that's just across the board. And obviously, because of the high cost of an education, the high cost of tuition, that it is more incumbent now that, you're getting loans, in order to, get a college education. Or you obviously work through college like a lot of us did in order to pay some of that off. At the end of the day, yeah, part political in terms of what's going on with this particular piece of legislation. But when we talk about the impact that it has on the Black community, we have the lowest net worth of any large group of folks within Black America right now, sitting on about $24,000 per household in net worth. And obviously, all of those folks did not have to get student loans. But, for those who did, yeah, it's a piece of candy. I don't think it makes a massive shift in terms of growing economic wealth, but the sooner you can get out of that, the sooner you can begin to grow wealth.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
So,
And so if you come along with a program to direct some of that money, I wish it was like an optional program where maybe for those who don't need the relief could opt to have that money redirected towards some other social good. Like Charles was just talking. He talked to his representatives. He said, hey, I would like my tax money to go here or there to actually solve some problems for people. I wish that element was added into this program. So for those that are making the money and can't afford to pay their loans back, could then turn around and say, hey, but there are some people who are suffering. Maybe you can use that money to fix some streets, to improve some schools, to buy some books, to incentivize families to stay together or to properly educate their children and demand an excellent education for their children, as opposed to just padding someone's pocketbook.
I understand. Now, one thing that I did find interesting, and maybe this has to do with the economics because you're looking at the entire country. When I saw anyone under $125,000, I can't say that I don't disagree with you in some sense, Jimmy, because I'm thinking, man, that's a lot of money, and I would think
A lot of cheddar.
who's making 125 as a single person, or
250 for a
as
family.
250. But again, maybe folks in San Diego and folks in New York might think a little bit different because the cost of living is a little bit different, and you have to have one number for everyone. But I thought that number was pretty interesting. But again, at the end of the day, obviously he's addressing the poor and or the middle class, and I think that number gets into maybe the upper middle class. I don't know, Charles, what that number looks like these days, but that should capture pretty much everybody.
Well, again, it's really interesting though that
Charles, let's see, can't hear you too well.
Okay. I can hear you, Charles. I can hear you,
Yeah,
Charles.
So maybe it's just my connection.
What's really interesting is that we can have this discussion, and if I'm not mistaken, the net impact in Black households, the net benefit to Black households is about $60 billion, right? But the program, if we use the numbers even that Jimmy used to start our program off tonight, is almost $1 trillion, 900 and some million dollars, right?
And we're talking about across the board, everybody, almost $1 trillion.
Yeah, so it ain't just Black folks that's getting a benefit from this. In fact, we're getting the smallest amount of benefit.
I would agree.
Tom, did you ever find that book?
Yes, I did. I ordered it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
It took a little while for me to find, but yes.
Did we get Jimmy a copy?
What is it?
I did order it.
I may already have. What is it?
Alienable Rights: The Exclusion of African Americans in a White Man's Land.
Okay.
It's really I found it to be a fascinating read just because it proves my contention that there was never an intent for us to have a benefit from government. And so anytime that we do, it means that something worked or failed to work as planned by these folk who are attempting as best they could to make sure you didn't get anything from government.
Tom, text me the title and the name of the author, and I'll get it and read it.
And I just got a note here. It says upper middle class is 400K or higher. So I was just by one of our listeners here. They said upper middle class is 400K or higher. So thank
Okay.
you, Miss Dominique.
Hey, before we end the show, Charles, I have to ask you now. My brisket recipe and strategy is now so superb that we're talking
Okay.
restaurant championship quality. So when are we going to have that brisket cook-off with the Black Cattleman?
We are working on that now, Jimmy. We cross our fingers. We will have that on the Friday evening as the culminating event of our annual conference. The Texas Association of African American Chambers of Commerce annual conference will be here in Dallas, convening at the Texas Black Academy of Arts and Letters. That's in the Dallas Convention Center. That Thursday and Friday, and Jim, we don't have. Short answer is I don't have it all wrapped up with a neat bow on it just yet, but we're working on that, and it will be that Friday, September 23rd.
And thank you for bringing that up because I was just thinking about that to make sure that we got that in before the show. If you could share a little bit for our listening public about what this conference is all about, and if they're interested, what should they do since that's coming up within the next 3 weeks?
Yes, go to the events button on TAAAT 3A's 2C's.org. That's the Texas Association of African American Chambers of Commerce. Under our events page, it has the information about our upcoming conference. For those folk who don't know, there are 30 Black Chambers of Commerce operating in the state of Texas now, from the Panhandle down to the Gulf Coast, deep in the piney woods over in East Texas, Central Texas, clearly, and in every of the major urban centers. There are 7 Black Chambers of Commerce here in North Texas. One just recently launched last month in Northeast Tarrant County and Southeast Denton County. Yeah.
Okay.
So North Richland Hills and that area up there. And so Fort Worth, Dallas, Arlington, Greater Southwest is southern rim suburbs in Dallas County. Collin County Black Chamber of Commerce, and even Ennis now is an exurb now. It's just on the fringe of urban center. So,
Okay.
So anyway,
why should people attend this convention?
Well, number one, because folk like Jimmy Stewart have been presenters at our conference in past years.
I hope to be a presenter again. So I'm still waiting on my invite. I want to come speak.
What we're our theme this year is, and I think you'd appreciate that, Jim, because that's what you've been talking about, is rebooting the Black business ecosystem.
There you go.
And
we have to do
just reigniting the spirit that drove the creation of Black enterprises in our state, particularly, but across the country as well. But clearly, Texas has a great history of business organizations or business advocacy organizations. First Black Chamber founded in Texas was the first Black Chamber founded in the nation, the Dallas Black Chamber in 1926. Yes. The first statewide Black Business Association founded right here in Texas. Texas State Negro Chamber of Commerce founded in 1936. And so we think that because Dallas is such a great market, a business market, we think it makes sense for us to convene here. Clearly, among those top issues that face Black-owned businesses is access to capital. I think that's all businesses, but access to capital, access to opportunity, and technical assistance. That is making sure that folk who offer themselves as business owners have the skills to be really competitive in a really competitive marketplace. And so we'll be talking for 2 or 3 days about that. We will hear from Tommy William Cunningham, the brother who has delivered Texas Economic Forecast for us for the last 7 years. We'll have to do it because he's not traveling right now, but he'll do it via Zoom or Google Meets or something like that, right? But we'll have him on screen. We'll talk to even folk like the president of the Citizens Council, who happens to be a Black man now, and the white, I call it almost reflexively the White Citizens Council. That was the people that kept Black folk from being in business.
Hmm.
But now that organization is led by a Black man who has a very different approach to how we solve economic challenges in our community. We hope to hear from Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson. We will hear from a panel of legislators, state senator, and 3 state representatives with a legislative forecast for the upcoming legislative session, which will convene in Austin in January. Um, we will hear about a program that we are a participant of in cooperation with the U.S. Black Chambers, which is called it's an SBA program, the Community Navigator Pilot Program, where we attempt as best we can to make sure that Black businesses, in our case, are able to access these programs that have the SBA has been made available for 50, 60, 70 years, but those opportunities have not trickled down to the people that we work for. So the Community Navigator Program, and then finally, because all businesses, but clearly all Black businesses suffered through the pandemic, we did learn some things, and we learned that um, you can conduct business in the digital environment.
Right.
You know,
Great
Zoom
equalizer.
calls and
That's
Zoom
right.
calls and Google Meets and all that kind of stuff. And so we're going to premiere what we're calling the TAC Digital Business Accelerator Program and install the first cohort of business owners that will learn how to uh, use technology to improve their business enterprises. And so we're really, really excited about that. And then finally, we'll also have a workshop on the U.S. Black Chambers Buy Black certification, where we know that the alphabet soup of business certifications, historically underutilized business, disadvantaged business enterprise, small business enterprise, minority women business enterprise, all that whole deal has not just boatloads of money or opportunity for us. Uh, have cities and governments of all kinds report out their minority utilization rate, but they don't talk about Black.
Hmm.
So they'll say we
Right.
have
Well, that's
20%,
women.
20%. Yeah,
That's white
simply
women. That's
white
and that's
women.
what that
That's
number
right.
represent. So let's
And
not, may as well call it what
yeah.
it is.
So we have created, the U.S. Black Chamber has created Buy Black, the Buy Black certification, and it is just that. And we have early stage, and I think we'll get to talk about that during the conference. We have 2 uh, major corporations that have tentatively uh, noted that they will accept the Buy Black certification, and we're working on a couple of federal agencies as well that will accept it. And so that will be a change in perception, yes, but a change in real opportunity in the marketplace. I think as a result of our doing something for ourselves. Back to your point, Jimmy.
Well, Charles, when you go down that path, you really discover who your friends are, because they'll be on that road blocking you. Um,
Yes.
but if there are any vacant slots for the conference, let me know. I would love to come and talk about technology and how we have to build our own technology infrastructure and how we can do that. We, having done it before, I can certainly advise folks on how we come together and do it again. It's not
That's
like a
right.
new venture for me. So I want to see us have our own, stop being on our knees, begging other folks to provide stuff for us. And I like the Black certification. If we get, but you know what, Charles, the reason that's important, we need to get out from under that minority umbrella. That minority umbrella does not. I mean, it hides too many other people. White women are the biggest beneficiary of that
That's
minority
right.
certification,
That's
and
right.
and with their white husbands hiding behind them, that once again that means the whole game is rigged against us. We think that it's in favoring us, but this Black certification may be a game changer. So if we can
That's right.
come up with a commission or a board to certify Black business, I'll tell you a little. When I started off many years ago, my first consulting business, I couldn't even get certified as a minority-owned business because I couldn't prove I was black.
Yeah.
My birth certificate, I didn't have the long version of my birth certificate. I only had the short version. I was born
Mhm.
at St. Paul. They're out of business. With
Mhm.
my long form birth certificate. Dallas only provided me the
Mhm.
short term form. The
Mhm.
short form doesn't say I'm black. My driver's
Mhm.
license doesn't say I'm black. I went and got my
Mhm.
military records. My DD 214 doesn't say I'm black. I couldn't even prove a black man walking in, handing my paperwork over to a certifying agency that I'm a black person. Couldn't
Right.
get approved.
That's right. That's
So
right.
so
And
so hopefully this certification board will will take actual color of the person into consideration more so than documents.
yes, yes.
And folks, we are right at the top of the hour.
Is
So
that the top of the hour already?
yes, sir.
Oh
Yes,
man,
Charles,
sir.
you got to come back, man.
man, you
Uh,
know I love this, man. Y'all just keep me on speed dial, man. If I can make it, I'm in. You got it.
All right. Why don't we everybody make their closing comments and then we'll wrap it up because it's right at
okay,
time.
Charles, give the dates again and the location for the
Uh,
conference because I will be there doing some
September
video and interviewing.
September 22nd,
Sept- Sep-
23rd.
Yeah,
That's a
27 and
Thursday
23rd.
and a Friday. Texas
Okay,
Black Academy of Arts and Letters, Dallas Convention Center.
okay.
TAAACC.org. That is Texas Association of
Do
African
you have to
American
register,
Educators.
buy a ticket, or can you just show up?
You register online. Just go to the event button on the website.
Okay,
Yeah.
got you.
All right, Jimmy. That's it for this evening.
All right, we welcome everybody back next week, same time. With that being said, we're out. We as well close the show down. We want to appreciate everyone who showed up and thank you so much.
Good evening.